And, to go back to this, I know you all didn't agree with me with my stance on this, but I think that's why it was so dangerous as a precedent what happened to the Grandmaster J whole movement. I don't like everything about the movement. I don't think they're, the most authentic organizers or whatnot, but they had white people scared. That's one thing that we I think we can all agree on. They had white people scared, they had Klan scared. And that's why, to me, it's just the timing. They had to silence this movement, even though it was sloppy in some ways, or it wasn't the most ideological and whatnot, but they had to silence it in order to make sure that we don't see an alternative. And right now, I mean, I think for a lot of people, like specifically in the younger generation, that, like I said, we talked about this previously, that have never seen the Black Panthers in action, have never seen the freedom fighters that actually like were challenging the authority with being armed. And we saw one quick movement come up where you seen mass Africans who were marching into the face of danger with guns. And that was so quickly silenced to the point where it's like a hopelessness. Like, okay, if that didn't work, then what's next? And that's the real problem I see, that we haven't had more talk about. I mean, I'm not going to assume everyone feels this way, but I really do feel strongly like that's what we have to do. We have to find ways to be organized, number one, ideological, absolutely, but we have to also arm ourselves. And until we do that, we're just going to be having these same sad stories happening to our children, which is horrible and to think about. And my heart goes out to the family, but we have to take that Second Amendment serious, is my opinion.
To your point, I think that I agree with you from the symbolism. Okay, but I wouldn't call that a movement. I think that if anything, what took place during that particular summer was a mobilization. It wasn't an organization, because if we were organized, then no one man could have caught a couple charges, and then the whole quote unquote movement is crushed. The reality is what happened. Looking at it from, we have to remember that America thrives off of fear. Okay. And that's why gun sales, dogs, and all this other stuff, security, military, all that's necessary. So what Grandmaster J, whatever the hell his name is, what he did was, I don't think he put white folks in fear. I think he caused them to get more organized. And that's why on January 6th, I think that they expected a response from Africans in the African community, because of the fact that they came and they showed their force. When they show their force, it's a little bit different. There's usually, I mean, in many cases, they come along and there's casualties. With us, we're not bringing along casualties. You understand what I'm saying? Not in this particular modern age or whatever. It's kind of for show. White folks, when they get scared, they just arm up. You understand what I'm saying? So what was done was they showed a bunch of the news, the media showed Grandmaster J and all these folks on Stone Mountain with guns. But what does it matter if you're not busting those guns? If you're not going into the community? The difference between them and the Panther Party is the Panther Party actually set up shop inside of the community. They set up organizations. So if you're not setting up anything practical for people to see afterwards, then of course it's going to fall apart. You can't, when the Panthers got arrested in Sacramento and they changed the gun laws, that didn't affect the whole Panther movement. That forced them to become more creative with what it is they were doing. But see, the thing right now with these hashtag movements and these sensationalists, it looks good. And for folks who haven't seen, like you said, many of us who weren't around when the quote unquote Panther Party was in full swing, yes, we looked at it and we were intrigued, and we looked at it as hopeful and so on and so forth. And so much so that many of us didn't learn from the mistakes that were made. And we didn't count the mistakes. We just said, look at that picture with Huey. He looks tough. Look at this picture with Asada. Look at this picture with Angela with her fists up. The symbolism is great, but we have to move beyond that, and we have to be able to create movements, because in fact, if we're not creating movements, what we're doing is we're identifying who we are, who's who, so on and so forth, so that it can be crushed. But we also need clandestine movements. We need folks in the streets organizing. We need political education classes being held right in the community on the regular. And the one thing about Bunchy Carter, and I'm not going to take up all the time, but the one thing about Bunchy Carter, we hear these stories about when they would have parties, discos in LA. You know what I'm saying? Bunchy was a renegade Slauson. He was a quote unquote gang leader before he became a leader in the Black Panther Party LA chapter. But one thing he would do is, even at the parties, even at the discos, he'd jump up on the table and he'd start politicizing the folks. You know what I'm saying? I didn't see that with the Grandmaster Jay situation. It's just, we gonna go out there, we got our guns, and if somebody do something, we gonna whoop de whoop. But not one bullet was bust. Let me rephrase. Let me bring that back. There were bullets that was bust, but they ended up shooting each other. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. It was accidental.
I would only add that, and again, I haven't studied Jay in terms of where he was as politics. What I give credit for, though, is I don't think there's a problem. I don't have a problem with the public showing of marches that potentially could be alternative forces. I think some of those public displays, I'm not expecting people to go out busting guns, because you're not going to be at this particular stage. People ain't being able to take on the police, the National Guard, and the Army. So I'm not necessarily looking for that either. And I do think there's a history of folks busting guns. And again, those struggles were destroyed by a more powerful force. So only when we're ready for that, or folks or there's a larger movement that can protect and surround that, would I expect something like that to happen. But I will say that, and again, not knowing his politics directly, the public showing, and again, as we've talked about before, giving people time to grow and change, or to grow into some politics, or be impacted, who is obviously at some point capturing some audience prior to even getting the media sort of spotlight on them. And then lastly, I'll say, somewhat in his defense, is whoever he was, he seemed to be dangerous enough for the feds to decide that they were going to target him with charges. And I don't know where those charges are at this particular point. I think we also have to be careful, because even if folks aren't a part of our movement, they don't come from where we come from, again, we got to give space, hopefully, if folks have some potential legitimacy for growth and training and public and political education. And again, I say that not knowing a lot about this brother at all, but I don't want to just sort of cast him individually. I don't want to sort of just cast somebody like that aside, who is face charges, is maybe even facing charges, has publicly done demonstrations with guns, seem to be organizing. Again, it could be something that wasn't going to develop. It could be something shady happening. But also, potentially that brother could have got some politics. I just don't know.
Before we go to break, I just got one minor pushback, and that would be that I would buy that, what you're saying, Kamal, had I not saw videos of him at a Trump rally defending Trump, doing security for Trump. I would buy that if I didn't see the video of him at a Black Lives Matter rally, taking off his shirt, saying that all lives matter, and clapping, and the police and everybody shaking his hand and hugging him and all that stuff, just a year and a half, 2 years prior to that. So if those cases weren't in effect, and these are videos that you can see online, it's not some mythical, magical shit that I'm just coming up with. If I didn't see him defending Trump, doing security, if I didn't see him in the streets talking about all lives matter, taking his Black Lives Matter shirt off with a group of white folks in North Carolina, then I might say, you know what, because of the fact that we don't judge people based on where they're not, we judge them based on where they are and the potential that they can have. I'm not just going to just throw you out there for the wolves because of the fact that I don't feel you have politics. That's irrelevant. You can learn. We got on the job training, but when you come from a background like that, and then all of a sudden when shit pop off, now you like this right here, I question what is your motive?